Right, ladies and gentlemen, friends, welcome to this meeting of the Conservative European Forum, where I'm delighted that we are joined by the Ambassador of the European Union to the United Kingdom, Ambassador João Vale de Almeida. He will be speaking to us on the future of the European Union and United Kingdom relations, opportunity and responsibility. If I can run through a few housekeeping points before asking the Ambassador to speak. This webinar is being recorded and it will be made available online via our website. The proceedings this evening are all on the record. We'll be using the meeting format, so could I ask everybody please to mute your microphones except when you are called to ask a question. And you probably get a better experience if you use the speaker view facility on Zoom. For those who'd like to ask a question, you use the chat facility on Zoom, and I will, as far as is possible, then call on you to ask your question live. If I can welcome João, I knew from when as Europe Minister, I visited Washington, DC, at which time he was the EU's ambassador to the United States of America. He took up that post, I think he was the first EU ambassador to the United States of America, and was also the EU ambassador to the United Nations. He focused in those roles on strengthening EU-US relations and launching the negotiations for the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, TTIP, which I think, to the disappointment of both of us, President José Manuel Barroso, the President of the European Commission, and he also acted as the EU Sherpa for G8 and G20 summits. João, you're very, very welcome indeed. You're amongst friends here, though that probably won't spare you knowing the members of CEF from some challenging questions when we get to those. We look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, can you hear me well, see me well? Is all fine? That's okay?
Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much. So thank you, David. Thank you all the friends on the other side. It's a real pleasure to start the new political season with a talk with you. I think you are my second or third public event since I returned to London, so it's a real pleasure, and I look forward to our discussion. As David indicated, I chose to for the title of this conversation the words opportunity and responsibility, and I'd like to tell you why I chose these two words. Regarding opportunity, I think my approach, and I dare to say maybe yours as well, is try to look forward and not necessarily look backwards. And for me, looking forward means that we should do our utmost to maximize the potential of this relationship. We are still major economies around the world. We are still neighbors and allies. We understand each other very well. We have a high degree of knowledge of the other side. For obvious reasons, we lived together for almost half a century, and we have a common history that goes, well beyond the membership of the European Union, and we together have a very important international leverage. So I believe that post-Brexit, post-COVID, and I dare to say post-Afghanistan, there is a lot we can do together. There is a potential that we can master, that we can maximize. And that's the opportunity I see, regardless of what we think of Brexit, regardless of the way Brexit was operated, the choices that were made and their consequences. We need now to move forward, look forward, and try to, again, make the most out of the opportunities that are lying ahead of us. But we have to do this with a sense of responsibility at the same time. So if there is a lot of things that we can do, I believe there's a lot of things we must do together. I think we owe it to our citizens, at least I feel it like that regarding my own citizens. I think that we owe it to our businesses that we act in a responsible way. And this means bilaterally and globally. If I think bilaterally, I think we have the responsibility that comes with the fact that we are neighbors. There's 0 kilometers between us in the island of Ireland. There's a few kilometers between us in the channel. We have people and families that have strong links, and we have an economic interdependence, interconnection, which is well known. And even most importantly, I would say, we share common values. So bilaterally, it is our responsibility, it is our duty to make this relationship work. So we have this high level of responsibility, in my view. Secondly, at the global level, you know how much our values are being challenged, how much the Western values are being challenged. We consider them to be global values. This is not the point of view of everybody around the world. The liberal order that we together developed after the Second World War is being seriously challenged. Multilateralism is in crisis. Our strategic interests are fundamentally the same, and we share a number of security threats, particularly post-Afghanistan, obviously. So bilaterally and globally, we need to assume our responsibilities. And I feel that as EU ambassador here, I feel that as a European official, I feel that as a European citizen. So in order to seize the opportunity and in order to exercise our responsibility, we need to have two things, in my view. We need to have the capacity to do so, but we also need to have the political will, the willingness to do so. It's not enough to be able, it's also necessary to be willing to exercise our responsibilities or seize the opportunities that we have. So to overcome the differences that exist, and one should not underestimate those differences. They were clear during the negotiation. They are unfortunately still visible in the post-negotiation in the first months after Brexit. In order to overcome those differences, I think that we need to focus on solutions. We need to focus on delivery. We need to focus on, creating the conditions to exercise responsibility and seize opportunities. And for that, I think we need to, look attentively at our attitude, at our mindset in our bilateral relationship. I believe that, it's in the interest of the relationship, with the background I tried to briefly describe, that we should be less interested in scoring points on old battles and rather focused on win-win cooperation for the future. And I think to do that, we need to be rational and maybe not too emotional, and certainly pragmatic. And the first thing I think we should do is to implement what we have so recently agreed after such a long and complex negotiation. The ink is not yet dry in the agreements that we have reached. They are only a few months old in terms of being implemented. So we need to focus on properly implementing them and finding the solutions for the problems that may appear. For that, I think it's important that we scale down the political discourse, that we allow time and space for solutions to be found, to some extent depoliticize these matters, in a way make Brexit a little bit more boring than it is today, so that maybe solutions can be found with less polarization and less emotions around. We have come a long way. We have a set of very ambitious agreements, far-reaching agreements in some areas. And we are starting to implement them. You know, all the committees that have been created within the TCA are beginning to meet now as we speak. And in the next months, you will have dozens of meetings of these committees. This is the engine room of the relationship. This is where our people, our teams will meet and try to find solutions for the problems. We need to allow this system to work. We need to give the withdrawal agreement, the Northern Ireland Protocol, and the Trade and Cooperation Agreement a chance to work properly. And I think this is the kind of attitude that I would like to see prevail in our relationship. And if there is one area where this kind of issues and the need for this attitude is absolutely necessary, is the case of Northern Ireland. I've just returned from a visit there with one of my bosses, a good friend, Maros Šefčovič. And for 48 hours, we had a very intense visit. I can tell we saw everybody that we thought we should see, and we had very intense discussions there. And our messages were very clear. We want to engage with Northern Ireland. We want to find solutions together with, of course, our British counterparts in London, but having in mind what the interests of the Northern Ireland people are. So in this context, and I conclude with these remarks, in line with our vision of seizing opportunities, exercising responsibility, we have, in the particular case of the Northern Ireland Protocol, tried to create space and time for solutions to be found. We have paused our legal action. We have not initiated other legal action, although we were, I guess, entitled to, because we want to find solutions. We don't want to create more problems. We want, the protocol was agreed to solve the problems created by Brexit in Northern Ireland. The protocol is not the problem. The protocol happens to be the only solution that we found together to address the problems created by Brexit and the kind of Brexit that the government has chosen. So the alternative is only to try to make it work with full respect for the concerns that we have identified. And I can tell you that we have, after our visit there, a very clear picture of how much is needed, what are the concerns, what are the alternatives or no alternatives. And I think if we adopt this mindset, if we put all our efforts, political and technical, into trying to find solutions, we can overcome this relatively still difficult phase of the post-Brexit situation. And again, as I said in the beginning, look forward and not backwards.
João, thank you very much indeed. That was a stimulating presentation, and you know, some I think some pragmatism and some cautious optimism. I think I took from that. Can I go first, as I know he has a vote relatively shortly, to Tim Kirkhope, Lord Kirkhope, please.
Oh, I hope you can hear me. Is the sound coming through okay?
That's fine.
Good.
That's fine.
Well, look, Ambassador, it's absolutely delightful to hear from you, and I'm very glad that you're having quite a useful time, particularly in your visit to Northern Ireland. And what I really wanted to ask you about was this. When the government said that it obviously wanted to secure our removal from the institutions of Europe, it also said at the time that they wanted, nevertheless, to have warm and friendly relations with the EU as an entity, and of course the member states. What is worrying me a bit, and you mentioned the differences at the time of the withdrawal and the withdrawal agreement, what I am rather conscious of is that we want to avoid, if we can, creating new differences. And where I'm thinking here, I mean, obviously I was partly involved with the GDPR the data protection regulations. So I've been very disappointed in a recent announcement by one of our secretaries of state that we're going to try and do a British version. I mean, that, in my view, is bad. And of course, the British component at the time of drafting that was very strong and obtained a lot of things in those agreements which actually were good for UK. And the other thing, I only wanted to mention two. The other one is Erasmus+. President von der Leyen, I listened to her speech this morning, the State of the Union speech in the Parliament, and it seemed to me that, you know, here we are, we're trying to create a new Erasmus called Turing, very merit-worthy, but all these sort of things that we start to create ourselves, and indeed it must be the case with the EU as well, take us further apart rather than bringing us together. So how can we work in a way which actually keeps these things now contained? And even if we're not regulated by each other, at least we are consistent with each other, cooperating with each other in a way which was, I understood, was always intended.
Thank you, Lord Kirkhope. Thank you all for, if I may, for your investment in Europe in the past, and I have high praise for your contribution in the European Parliament in particular. So thank you for attending and thank you for your question. I think we shouldn't forget that the TCA as a word cooperation. It's not only about trade, it's not only about dispute settlement, it's not only about potential arbitration, it's not about level playing field and potential consequences if it is not respected. It's about cooperation. And it's a very ambitious agreement, if I compare with others, where you have a number of areas where this cooperation is possible. I know you will have to vote, so I'll be quick. So we need to be very attentive, and one of my jobs here in my team is to do exactly that. And I'm sure Lindsay Appleby in Brussels does the same, is to see what are the areas of potential divergence and where is the direction of travel on each side, and additionally to try to see where we can come together. And I believe that the governance of the TCA that is now being implemented as we speak, the first meetings of all these committees, should be the place where our experts, our representatives try to find that common ground and try to avoid excessive gap between us. You mentioned data protection regulation, all the sort of rules in our side. We have recently provided the UK with an adequacy decision regarding data flows, which has a strong dimension of data protection and privacy and all that. We took note of the announcements that have been made. We, of course, reserve our judgment further down the road, but I think it will be very important that we avoid coming to a situation where we limit the capacity of our business and our economies to have a flow of data, which is now, of course, vital to our economy. So I think we need to remain attentive. We need to explore the possibilities within the TCA. On Erasmus Plus, of course, we regret the fact that the UK did not want to continue in Erasmus. There ain't much we can do about that. Our member states are on a bilateral basis looking at different possibilities with UK. I think we always remain open to review that situation, but it takes two to tango here. But I think in my discussions with my fellow ambassadors here, we are very keen to make sure that we keep the line of communication among young people, the exchange of students, the access to universities on both sides. There are a number of issues related to visa policy and immigration policy that unfortunately we didn't go as far as we would have liked in the agreement. So, I always say this is a living animal to a certain extent. We are not ready to renegotiate anything, but within the limits of these treaties, I think there's potential to do better, and in my view, the responsibility to avoid it having an even more detrimental effect.
Thank you. Such Karim.
Thank you very much, David. Ambassador, Your Excellency, thank you very much for making the time to be present today. I'm a former member of the European Parliament from the northwest of England. I served for 3 terms. It was a tremendous honour and privilege, and our paths did cross, albeit from some distance from time to time. I know as a highly experienced diplomat, you will not feel there's any need for the following comment, but as a Brit and a Conservative, I feel there is a need to apologise for the antics of our government and the way that it treated your office a few months ago. But moving on very swiftly, the point that I want to touch upon is building on from where Lord Kirkhope spoke about our relations and distance and the effects of that. When I was in Parliament, I was the rapporteur for the EU-India Free Trade Agreement. I am seeing that presently we, of course, the European Union, of course, has, I still refer to it as we, the European Union has ongoing negotiations with India at present, and the United Kingdom is extremely keen to get its negotiations up and running. But what I am seeing is that the red lines that we had in place previously are all one by one seeming to fall to the wayside. Is it the case, actually, that there is a real danger that through Brexit, we are now so weakened that we will start to give way on values that we held very, very dear previously? As Brits, we are old hands at playing the game of divide and rule. Is it the case that others are now going to play that against us and the European Union for their advantage?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your service, as the Americans say, to the European Parliament and the European Union. And no, I don't think we are ready. And you know the European Parliament well. The European Parliament will never allow the sort of race to the bottom for any reason on the European trade policy side. I think we've been investing a lot, as you know, in creating conditions for a EU-India trade agreement and beyond. It's not yet been possible, but we are continuing to fight for that. But I don't think you should fear on our side any compromise on fundamental issues. But at the same time, India is a big player, will be a bigger player in the future. It is situated in a critical geopolitical and geostrategic area for all of us. So I'm sure you can count on the EU to continue to invest in that. And also thank you for your very kind words in the beginning. But allow me to say that I was very glad to have news this week that Her Majesty the Queen will host me in mid-October for the presentation of my credentials. So we consider this matter closed in a successful and positive way. And I'll be honored and privileged to present my credentials to Her Majesty the Queen.
Charles Tannock, please. Have we got Charles?
Yes, I'm right here.
Thanks, good. Far away, please.
Sorry, I wasn't planning, but I'm very happy to ask a question of my old friend, João Vale Almeida, and I'm also delighted he's been given full diplomatic recognition. And I'm a very strong friend of Portugal, so I'm always delighted when people from a country that I know so well, Portugal, are representing the EU wherever. But my question was about foreign and security policy, and you mentioned Afghanistan, and I put it in the chat comment that, of course, I think we have to draw some conclusions that the defeat in Afghanistan and the lack of consultation by the Americans and the way they withdrew suggests to me that even President Biden, who makes a huge commitment to multilateralism and being close to the EU and friendly towards the EU, unlike his predecessor, clearly is still semi-isolationist, and we can't quite rely on that relationship, which many Brexiteers thought was a given, particularly had Mr. Trump been re-elected. So I'm hoping that this may signal, particularly now with the appointment of a new foreign secretary today, who was a Remainer. I know Liz well. She is a multilateralist. She is an internationalist by inclination. Is there any hope now, do you think, that we could see a closer alignment of the United Kingdom on foreign and security and defense policies, particularly given the fact that Afghanistan poses huge risks if it were to become a safe haven for international terrorism? So I'm hoping this might be the chance for a reset, or am I being too optimistic?
Well, muito obrigado, Charles Stanek. Prazer. You not only like Portugal, you speak Portuguese very well, and I'm always, it's always a pleasure to engage with you. Thank you very much also for your service in the European Parliament, which was well noted, and we cooperated a number of times. On Afghanistan, I think what I would say, I mean, there's a lot of things that one could say about the withdrawal, the way it was operated, a lot we could say about, the intervention, all our intervention in Afghanistan, what was the purpose, what were the results. I think there's a great deal of debate going on about that, lessons to be learned. I think I would focus on the idea that we should not throw the baby with the bathwater, in the sense that we should not take the Afghanistan case as a sign that the US is forever out of the picture, or that the transatlantic relations is forever condemned to a non-success. No, I think the transatlantic relationship, be it between the EU and the US, or between the UK and the US and other partners, the NATO dimension as well, all this is extremely important, too important to be the victim of a situation that we regret. That, by the way, needs to be understood a little bit better with time. So I think our focus on our side will be to continue to invest in the transatlantic relationship. I give you an illustration of that. This week, if not tomorrow or Friday, we'll have the first meeting of a recent initiative we took with the Americans, which is the Trade and Technology Council. David mentioned earlier my modest contribution to TTIP. TTIP was a lot about what we are about to discuss in this Trade and Technology Council. It's about regulatory leverage. It's about regulatory leadership. It's about joining efforts across the Atlantic to ensure that we call the shots on future technology, not other people. So it's an illustration of the fact that we need to continue to invest in this relationship. I'm not going to comment on the UK-US, but I note that the Prime Minister will be next week in Washington, and I think it's important that we continue to engage with our American friends. This being said, as far as the EU is concerned, it is clear that we need to draw lessons from this situation, not only from Afghanistan as such, but also from the fact that it is clear now that the US will no longer play the role that it used to play until, let's say, 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. And this is not President Biden, this was President Trump, this was President Obama already, and I was in the US long time enough to understand that the trend is irreversible. And we need to draw conclusions from this, we Europeans, we EU countries. And this is about strengthening our own capacity on defense, security, and beyond, not in opposition to NATO. NATO remains in the Treaty of Lisbon itself as one of the pillars of the security in Europe, and I believe it should continue to be the case, but in complementarity with NATO. And there are a number of initiatives. President von der Leyen mentioned that today in her State of the Union speech, where we will engage further with NATO. We will deepen our capacity to act on the external front. This will be, I guess, in my view, the new frontier of European construction to a large extent in the coming years. So I think we need to draw the lessons from Afghanistan, see it in a wider perspective, continue to reinforce the transatlantic relationship, which is irreplaceable, and at the same time, as far as we are concerned, looking at our own capacity to be a stronger actor in these fields in the international scene, because the trend is very clear. We need to assume more responsibilities regarding our defense and security. We need to do better in using our own resources. And there's a lot of discussion about the defense industry. There's a lot of discussion about innovation in the framework of defense. A lot of discussion about and action about pooling our resources, budgetary and otherwise. So I think this will be an exciting topic for the coming years. On EU-UK, I tend to share your view that Afghanistan at least should invite us to consider the potential and the positive side of deeper cooperation between London and Brussels, and between London and different capitals on matters of foreign policy, security and defense.
Thank you. Nicholas McLean.
Ambassador, coming back fresh from Northern Ireland, I don't need to say how important it is to reduce the friction in trade, especially some of what appear to be the petty rules, the over-bureaucratic approach. And I wondered what the prospects are for a sanitary and phytosanitary and veterinary agreement such as exists between the EU and Switzerland. Is the barrier the British government insisting on its own kind of standards and its own sovereignty, or are there other difficulties?
Well, thank you very much for your question. We discussed this at length with our British friends for many months now. We discussed last week in Belfast with the political leadership of all the parties, with the executive of Northern Ireland, but also with the business representatives. And maybe I'm wrong, but I think everybody would agree with an SPS agreement, more or less modeled on the Swiss agreement. But that does not seem to be the case for the government, for reasons that we must respect. So, replying directly to a question, we are ready to move in that direction. If this direction is not possible, and Maros Šefčovič said it very clear, we are also ready to look into the details of it and see if there is a way to have a sort of a bespoke agreement. Let's see what we can do about that. So we are open. We are investing in it. It's one of our priority areas, because if we have a deal like this, we actually will remove roughly around 80% of the checks and controls that we have.
Exactly.
And as you know, on phytosanitary issues, you need to be very rigorous, because it's enough for one cow to go through, or one piece of processed meats to create all sorts of problems. We've seen that in the past. And our consumers, and Northern Ireland consumers, I'm sure as well, as much as British, Great Britain consumers, they are very keen to keep this high level of standards. We have similarity of standards still today. We don't know about the future. So I think there are good grounds for us. We even said that we could do a temporary agreement of a limited duration. So we are very much open to that. But again, it takes two to tango, and we'll see whether we can dance that song, that song or not.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Actually, in that context, João, can I put a question that's been given to me by John Corrie, former Member of Parliament at Westminster, former MEP and Member of the Parliamentary Assembly at the Council of Europe. And he takes a slightly different view from Nicholas McLean, saying under the European treaties, whether Europe and Ireland like it or not, all external borders are hard borders, and therefore the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland is a hard border. He says there's no precedent for making false borders at ports in the United Kingdom. The protocol will never work. So why is the UK taking all the blame for this situation? Isn't it time for the EU to reopen the appropriate treaty and draw up a new plan within the existing EU treaties? How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, I respect that position, but I beg to disagree. Let's go to the basics of this problem. Brexit happened. The choice of the modalities of Brexit was one that excluded the UK from the single market and the customs union. At the same time, this created a huge problem for Northern Ireland if we wanted to protect the Good Friday Belfast Agreement, if we wanted to preserve the constitutional integrity of territorial integrity of the United Kingdom, and if we wanted to protect the single market. So this was the kind of squaring of the circle that we had to aim at. It took us a number of years to discuss this. I'm sure I was not involved at that time in the negotiations, but I'm sure they all turned every stone in order to find a common ground, a solution for the problem. The protocol is the result of that work, right? The protocol is not something that we invented. The protocol is the response to the problems created by Brexit in Northern Ireland, and it was the result of the respect of the red lines of the British government. It was agreed by both, signed by both, ratified by both parliaments. It's international law, it's EU law, it's UK law, I think, and the ink of this agreement is not yet dry. So I think what we should focus on is to try to implement. This being said, Northern Ireland is a unique situation. There is no other place in the world that has access to our single market for goods, and of course is fully integrated into the UK market. There's no other place in the world. So a unique situation, of course, requires a unique attention to the way we implement it. And this is what we're doing. So we are not applying to the East-West Irish Sea border the same absolute rigor that we are applying to other elements of parts of the external border of the single market. This should be taken into consideration. This is the first time in our history that we outsource the control of the external border of the single market to a third country. And that gives you an idea of how far we have gone in trying to reconcile the three elements of the squaring of the circle I referred earlier. So it's a unique situation. We are ready to treat it in a unique way, but there are limits to it. There are limits to it. And I'm sure our UK friends understand that the UK having been in the past a great proponent of the single market, and many of your leaders, including conservative leaders and conservative commissioners, have played an important role in designing and consolidating the internal market. So you are well placed to understand how critically vital the single market is for the European Union, and how attentive we need to be in preserving its integrity. This being said, what we are showing is a high degree of flexibility. Let me give you an example of medicines. We realized recently that the situation created by Brexit would seriously impact upon the capacity of Northern Ireland citizens to have access to medicines that they rightly need. And we looked at it, we turned it upside down, we looked at all the aspects of it, and Maros Šefčovič has been advocating, and will move forward with that, a revamping of our own legislation, not a revamping of the protocol, but upstream, revamping our legislation on medicines in order to allow the conditions for access, continued safe access of medicines to, or Northern Ireland citizens access to medicines coming from the United Kingdom. So this is an example in which we are showing flexibility. I could give you a series of other examples. So I must refute this idea that I see taken in some areas in the UK debate, that we are being bureaucratic, that we are being inflexible. It's the other way around. we are treating the Northern Ireland case in a way that we don't treat any other situation. We are ready to go further. And what I'd said in the very beginning, that we are creating time and space to look at all these issues. We are ready to look into SPS, even with the Swiss style. We are ready to look at the border checks. We are ready to look at the particular case of companies that export rather trade with Northern Ireland, but don't export elsewhere. They are not in the global market. You know, small-sized traders or companies that send products to Northern Ireland, but are not involved in the global market export. So there are all these issues that we are looking into in a very constructive spirit. But you should not forget that the problem arises from the particular situation in Northern Ireland and the effects of Brexit upon it. It's not something that we sort of invented because we want to create problems for people.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you, João. Could I just follow up from the chair on that, just to ask about the visit that you paid to Northern Ireland recently, accompanying Vice President Šefčovič. And I saw some of this reported on Twitter. It certainly looked pretty busy. But I wondered whether you felt any optimism after the conversations that you will have had with unionist politicians there, because as you'll know, João, there is a genuine political problem now in Northern Ireland, where with the protocol dividing opinion on sectarian lines, which is potentially very divisive and even dangerous in Northern Ireland. I just wondered, if you're able to say anything about the message you may have picked up from the unionist community.
Thank you, David. Of course, we know Northern Ireland. We've been involved as EU in the peace process since the very beginning of the Good Friday Belfast Agreement. We are still there physically in terms of the financial support for programs there, and we visited some of the projects. It's wonderful to see that we are directly contributing to creating solid conditions for peace and reconciliation in Northern Ireland. But we also know that it is a volatile situation, and we need to be very attentive to all the different elements. That's why with Mara Šefčovič, we were very keen to meet all the actors there. And again, the meeting we had with the 5 political leaders of the 5 main parties was extremely interesting. That includes, of course, DUP and UUP, and Sir Geoffrey Donaldson and Doug Beattie, and we agreed to continue to talk, including, of course, with the unionists that you mentioned. And I've been having contacts myself here in London with their representatives, and Mara Šefčovič is ready and eager to continue those discussions. Of course, our negotiation is with London, of course, with David Frost and his team. That goes without saying. But I think it's very important that for us, and I'm sure for the UK government, to have in mind the feelings, the expectations, the concerns of Northern Ireland politicians, including, of course, those who are against the protocol. And we want to find common ground. We definitely want to find common ground. Well, our purpose is to again complete the squaring of the circle and make sure that the solutions we find are fulfilling the objectives of protecting our single market for obvious reasons, respecting the constitutional order of the United Kingdom, and strengthening, not weakening, the peace and prosperity and reconciliation process in Northern Ireland.
Thank you very much. Can I go to John Bowies, please?
Thank you, David. Ambassador, I wonder if I might ask a slightly mischievous question. When I was elected to the European Parliament, the EU was led by big beasts. We listened to them, we respected them. They had something to say, and they had big brains to bring to the problems of the day. But where today are the Chris Pattons, the Mario Montis, the Pascal Lamy, and so on? Or are we waiting for Angela Merkel to pick up the reins of the Council President as mooted by recent newspaper articles?
Yeah, I don't know what you want me to reply to that question, but my margin of maneuver is relatively limited in the sense that, there are two rules for me. Member states are all equal and commissioners are all equal. So, and that's my rule. Now, I think you can count on the leadership of the European Union, the European Commission, President von der Leyen, the European Council, Charles Michel, the European Parliament with David Sassoli, and of course the national leaders to be absolutely focused on the future of Europe. And if I may extrapolate from your question and look at what has happened since Brexit in Europe, where contrary to what some had expected and some had hoped for, there is a strengthening of support to the European Union in our member states following Brexit, for whatever reasons that I leave you to analyze. But the fact is that today's polls show the highest degree of support for the European Union since the end of the financial crisis. So this is a sort of an objective measurement of the support that we have for this project. And as I was saying earlier, if you look at the post-COVID, post-Afghanistan, if you look towards our challenges regarding climate change, the response of Europe is quite an articulate one, quite a coordinated one, with this next generation EU sort of Hamiltonian moment, with new ways and means to finance our effort, but also this idea of building back better, with the resilience, with digital, with green dimensions. I think I'm, I wouldn't say optimistic, but I'm very positive about the state of the union right now. We have our issues, right? We have our imperfections, and some of them we could discuss in another occasion. But overall, I sense and Mrs. von der Leyen's speech today was a good illustration of that, a sense of hope about what we can do together. My hope as well as ambassador here is that we can do in this next few years as much as possible, a lot together with the United Kingdom, in cooperation with the United Kingdom in many areas. That's my hope.
Thank you, João. I had a question sent in by Oliver Jacques, who says, to what extent has the pandemic had an impact on supply chains and logistics in EU member states? And is it in any way comparable to the scale of disruption and difficulty seen in the UK?
It had an impact. In a number of areas. I still remember it has an impact, I would say, in two dimensions at least. One was to highlight and reveal our degree of dependence from the outside in a number of supplies. Typically, in the beginning of this crisis, we realized that we were not producing one single pill of paracetamol, one single pill produced in Europe, at the beginning of this crisis. And there are many examples of that, of course. So it revealed our dependence. And secondly, it revealed how complex the supply chains in a globalized economy are. And maybe we had not realized that fully before. The COVID crisis revealed the complexity of supply chains. Now, if I take the case of UK, which we are following attentively, there may be a case to consider that all these effects that we felt in Europe are being, let's say, made more difficult and more visible and more impactful by Brexit. So there's a case to say that there is a combination of the COVID effects with the Brexit effects in terms of supply chain, but also I see a great debate in this country about labor shortages. We also have a dimension of labor shortages in some of our countries for a number of reasons. I think here you may have the same plus the impact of Brexit, but that's a debate for Britain to have, not for me. I'm just trying to understand where we are. As far as we are concerned, COVID had an impact on supply chains at the two levels I mentioned earlier, which brings us to the discussion about our autonomy in a number of areas, including that one. I gave you the example of chips, you know, the processors, microprocessors, where we realized that we were extremely dependent. There is shortage of chips in European industry these days, which is a combined effect of many factors, including COVID. And this led to an awareness that we need to be more autonomous there. And Mrs. von der Leyen today, in her speech, launched this idea of a CHIPS Act, which is a way to create the conditions for higher degrees of production in Europe of this product.
Thank you. Can I go to Liz Spencer, please?
If she's not here, David, perhaps you want to read.
Yes, okay. So Liz has asked about COP26. Yeah. Says that this is of equal importance to both the EU and the UK. And how can we improve cooperation between both parties to secure a positive outcome to the Glasgow summit?
Thank you, and I agree. This is an area of positive agenda. As a good example of positive agenda, where basically our positions are very much convergent, our interests are very much convergent, and our purpose is absolutely the same. We want the fight against climate change to be a successful one. We are running out of time. Glasgow COP26 is a major point in the direction towards achieving our goals of limiting climate change. So we are working very well. I mean, our leaders and EU leader and the UK leaders, in particular Executive Vice President Timmermans and Alok Sharma, are working hand in hand. There's still a number of hurdles between now and Glasgow, I can guarantee you. It does not depend, of course, solely on the UK and the EU. If I take two other partners that are extremely important, one is the US and the other one is China, we need to bring everybody on board with the same level of ambition. And I think we'll be working well hand in hand. It's one of our priority issues right now.
Thank you very much. Can I just finally, João, just press you a little bit on the idea of European strategic autonomy that does feature in many speeches from both the President of the Commission and the President of the European Council. I mean, when I sat on the General Affairs and Foreign Affairs councils, I mean, it was often very difficult to get a consensus. And I can remember, for example, over Libya, big foreign and defence and security issue, where France and Germany were at complete odds with each other. And if I look back at last year, it was very difficult for the EU to get agreement over quick sanctions against Lukashenko. There was not really a cohesive EU position on the tensions in the Eastern Mediterranean because of differences between member states. And I just wonder whether you are more optimistic that the EU is going to be capable of exercising the sort of global weight geopolitically in the way that it is able to do already with regard to trade? Or do you think simply that this balance between EU action and intergovernmentalism is going to mean that actually the EU has got to accept that you have strategic autonomy on trade, but actually on CFSP, CSDP, that's going to remain very much with member state governments?
Well, David, you know, and many of our colleagues and friends in the audience know the Union very well. And you know that we are 27 member states, and each of them has the right to its own positions. And our exercise is to try to find common ground and address the different nuances that people have. And on foreign policy and security and defense, everything that we've been discussing today is you have different nuances. You have different histories, you have different geographic proximities, you have different starting points from. So it's a difficult exercise. The beauty of it is that when we agree, we count. When we disagree, we count less, and that's what sort of motivates us. I believe that if I look back at the European history, the importance of exogenous factors, external factors, has been always extremely relevant, right? I don't know to go through different examples of it. I tend to believe that the situation that is being created by the evolution of the American position, also Brexit, and the threats that we see all around our neighborhood, from Ukraine to the Western Mediterranean. All these are factors, not to mention also the Western the Balkans, of course. All this goes in the direction of saying this may be a wake-up call for the EU. A wake-up call also post-Afghanistan, of course. A wake-up call for us to realize that we need to try to do better. And in respect for our differences, and I mentioned NATO, there are different positions regarding NATO. Some of our member states are not part of NATO. Others are extremely keen to make NATO the center of gravity of our security and defense apparatus. All this, I believe, can be reconfigured in a way that provides the Union with a better capacity to act. But as I always say in these kind of discussions, and you know it very well yourself, it's not enough to be able to act. You have to be willing to act. And that's a debate that goes deeper into our societies, whether or not our public opinions are ready for the responsibility that comes with the fact that we want or should or need to ensure our own security in a more obvious way than up to now. So it's a big debate. I continue to believe that this could well be, as I said earlier, the new frontier of European construction, after a single market, after the euro, after common policies, common foreign and security policy, and the accompanying defense and security dimension could be well be the justification for further European integration and further European efforts. Let's see how the debate evolves.
Thank you very much indeed, and with apologies to those whose questions we have been unable to reach, that brings us to the end of our meeting. Can I say the warmest of thanks to Ambassador João Vale de Almeida for a tour de force in setting out his stall and then answering a wide range of questions from CEF members. I'm sure, João, that we will remain in close touch with you during your time here, and we hope that this proves to be a good and fruitful tour in the United Kingdom. I suspect there's one or two EU ambassadors elsewhere in the world who will be looking at dealing with post-Brexit Britain as luxury compared with the regimes that they are having to contend with in their respective postings. I apologise for the fact that, like so many stars of theatre and opera in the last 18 months, we cannot give you an audible round of applause, but you will have to accept a virtual round of applause and ovation, but it is nonetheless very warm and very sincere. Thank you. And could I say,
Thank you.
Could I say that anyone who's not a member who's been listening in but would like to join, please visit our website at conservativeeuropeanforum.com, and we have, amongst forthcoming events, a fringe meeting at our party conference on Tuesday the 5th of October at 6 p.m, joint meeting with the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung and the Hans Seidel Stiftung on the future of UK and German relations. It's with the Right Honourable Greg Hands, MP, who the last time I looked was still a Minister of State at the Department for International Trade, but long experience of Germany, and that will be within the secure area of at Manchester, so you will need a conference pass for that. Thursday the 21st of October, although I should say we will try to make this available online as well. We just don't know whether that will definitely be possible. Thursday, the 21st of October, a webinar with George Freeman, MP, on the Prime Minister's Task Force on Innovation, Growth and Regulatory Reform and Tech Regulation. And Tuesday, the 16th of November, the annual President's Reception with our President, the Right Honourable Amber Rudd. I look forward to seeing many members at those events. Thank you very much indeed.
You give me
Thank
two
you,
seconds, David. Now, just to say that I will be at the Conservative Party conference, as well as the Labour Party conference, but I'll be and we are holding a reception, I guess, on Monday,
Right.
on the Monday of the conference in Manchester. So I'll be more than glad to invite you all there, and I hope to see you individually in the corridors in the kind of speed dating exercise that the conference entails. And I'm very much looking forward to meeting you there and discussing further with you. Thank you very much for the.
Thank you as well. All the best to you, and I declare the meeting closed.